There are 1,000 stories in the Envisioner's future. This is just one of them. Well, hello and welcome. Dave Coplin here with the best show on YouTube, bar none. Absolutely. The other shows, they can't catch us. They can't even catch us. We have won YouTube. We're winning YouTube. We didn't just win by a little, we're winning by a lot. I know we don't have the subscriber numbers that other channels may do, but that means nothing. We are all winners here. And thank you for joining us as winners. And speaking of numbers, while you're there, if you're enjoying the show, you're about to enjoy this show, let me tell you that. Why don't you give us a subscribe or a like and hold that thought. So, where are we today? Today we're talking about the second most talked about topic about the world of remote working, the world of dialing into the future of work. And this is the topic that talks about social cohesion and engagement. And it talks about all of the things that we've lost, the intangible, invisible things, the conversations down the corridor, the chat around the coffee machine, the conversation as you go in through the doors to work, where we're connecting to different parts of the organization. Turns out there's a little bit of magic in those social connections. Turns out that actually those social connections are the things that we no longer have, not just because we're not bumping into people by the coffee machine, but because if you think about the way that we now run our meetings, the way that we run our conversations, we go from meeting to meeting. There's no social chit chat. I go from one Zoom call to another Teams call and I'm straight in on the agenda. I'm straight in on the conversation. No, how are the kids? No, what's been going on at weekend? It's work, work, work. We do that at our detriment. So we're all feeling a little bit punch drunk from this. We're all feeling a little burnt out. And actually we're realizing this social connection becomes much, much more important. And that's why I'm really pleased today that today's guest is somebody who's spotted that as a problem, but equally from an entrepreneurial perspective has spotted it as an opportunity to help businesses with. So I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to Julian Orgill, who has created an organization called Hum Not Drum, which intends to do exactly that. Julian, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dave. It's really nice to be here. And that's quite a nice intro.
Excellent. I'm sure the check will be in the post, socially distanced, of course.
Yeah,
so look, what I'd love, Julian, is I'd love to hear a bit about your journey, because this wasn't something you just sort of woke up one morning and thought, I know, I'll create a business to do this. This was a bit more of a personal experience that's sort of inspired us. Take us through how that all came together.
Yeah, that's right, Dave. I think the business is about it's about a week old now in its official form, but where it came from was the early days of lockdown, and at the end of March we were all sent away from the office and we needed to be working at home. And at that point in time, my employer at the time, I was working on a project-based work, which, went on hold quite quickly, which meant that I had some time on my hands. And, I've got two young kids and they needed educating because the schools were shut. But I kind of went for a run one evening, and the idea came as I was running down a path around the back of where I live, and it was the first time where somebody was running towards me and I had to stop and sort of hide away in the nettles and the bushes to let them pass, because I realised at that point that other people were, quite a danger potentially at that time. We didn't really know what was going to happen. And so at that point in time, it struck me that I was just missing this social engagement, this digital way of working that you talked about, Dave, where you're either in a meeting or you're out of a meeting. It's very easy to feel isolated in that sense, in a personal sense. And I was always one of those people that would be talking to people around the office. I would be popping up saying hello. And sort of gently be part of the furniture, and I just love people, and I felt that I was desperately missing them. So I'm also a bit technically minded, as you might see from some of the things in the background, and I had the right combination of leads in my drawer to be able to wire up Zoom to my mixing desks. And I worked it through on the run, and just put a meeting in the whole company's diary the next morning, entitled Friday Feel Good Session, 8 a.m. till 9 a.m. And I thought, well, I wonder who will come. And 8 a.m. rolled around, and I logged on, and then there was 80 to 90 people out of a company of sort of 400 people dialed in. And I played some music, and we had a chat, and just everybody loved it. And I think what that made me realize was that it wasn't just me that was feeling this sort of sense of isolation. And as I was playing the music, I could see that people were getting ready for their day. They were having breakfast with their families. They were, all of that communication that you miss, the other people that you see, the familiar faces. It just gave a tremendously good feeling, and it developed from there. But that was how it started.
I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, I love the fact that I just happened to have the right leads, in my
Oh yeah.
desk. Come on, this was the moment you'd been waiting for, surely.
Well, I look back on it now, and it was a really important decision that I made that day to just do it. I wasn't at the point where I was asking for permission for anyone. I was doing something that I knew was right in my heart, and I knew that people would respond well to. And I thought, I want to do this. This is something that I can do. I can give to the company, to help people through their day. And I think that's where the transforming it into a business. I feel like I'm I'm starting a consultancy, and I can make content for people, but actually I think my drive is to help as many people through the ways in which we're having to work now, as I can, because I think there are lots of people that are missing lots of things, and I've read research from McKinsey's and lots of other people, and the way that people are thinking about it, they're almost grieving for parts of their
Yeah.
pre-pandemic life. And I think I think good companies understand that the happiness of their people is paramount. And if you can help them to express themselves as part of a team, and also bring their full selves to work, which requires knowing each other in a way, then you will get the best out of those people, albeit in quite a difficult situation for everyone.
Yeah, no, look, I think that's absolutely right. And I also think there's something really important about what's happening to us now. And look, I know this is a bit of a generalization, but I do feel a lot of organizations were in the first 6 months of the pandemic. Well, look, we just got to get through the next few months. That's all we've got to do, right? Just whatever we have to do, we'll just get through. As we enter
Yeah.
into the uncertainty of what may be the next 6 months, I know a lot more of those organizations, and specifically the leaders, are now thinking, oh, okay, well, hang on a minute. This is going to go on for quite a while. What are the things that we really now need to do? They can no longer be stopgaps, but actually need to inform and be part of how we operate. And again, regular viewers will know the number one thing that comes up in all of our conversations is around it's around trust, but it's around the humanity of how we bring those human parts of our working lives into a world where we are, in one of the most human of places, our homes, but actually in a way that's distanced from everybody else. So I think you're coming to this at the right time, and organizations recognize that this is an issue. Talk me through a bit about what's the journey that you'd like to take. Let's say I'm an organization and I've realized that I want to do this. I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to start talking to you. What's the journey that you'd like to take me on, Julian, in order to
Yeah,
make that happen?
I think the journey starts with understanding where you are. So, I was talking to somebody, a friend earlier this week, and we were talking about his career options. He's applying to LinkedIn. He said, "Oh, I just got to decide what I want to do." And the first thing he's got to do is to work out where he is. And I think actually an honest conversation about where you are as an organisation and what you know and what you don't know, without going all Donald Rumsfeld about it, is actually, have you asked your people how they're feeling? In a way that will give you a genuine response. And there are a number of companies out there that will be able to run surveys for you, and getting a temperature check is really important, because depending on your company culture, depending on where your company is in terms of its psychological safety, without turning it too scientific, there are different things that you would need. If a company has always struggled with being informal, or there's quite a strong structure, then people will be worried about the absence of that structure. And so, how do you show that actually it's okay, and there are some areas where the structure may need to change, or you might need to be doing something slightly different? There could be, however, if you are a company that is quite comfortable with discussing issues, facing into challenges, and you have more of a growth mindset, then some content around discussing some of the key issues of the day and more of a debate might be what you need. With Iris, my previous employer, I started, the Iris FM started out as out and out feel good, and it then quickly developed into something more thematic as agencies around the world joined. But then we started to delve deeper into individuals, and particularly around the time where the tragedy of George Floyd happened in the States, we started to tackle some fundamental issues in society. So we tackled, we discussed racism, we discussed gender equality, we discussed diversity in the workplace, in a humble and human way. But we were doing some quite heavy lifting, actually, in terms of the things that we were talking about. And I think as people are assimilating that in their own homes, they're forced to think a bit more deeply about it. So this is a long way and not a very direct answer to your question, Dave, but it starts with your purpose. It starts with where your company is, and it starts with your objectives about what you need to do. And I think a lot of companies don't have a full handle on that. And I can certainly help to surface some of those issues, and can start with what is possible now and develop it and where your company wants to go. My experience of this is that these things take on their own identity and generate their own content and positivity, and then you can see how it develops from there. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, it does, and in spades. There's a couple of things actually. There's a really poignant point that you made there about the George Floyd context. But I think any event like that sort of provokes a very visceral response in people, and I do feel that there is people need to process events like that and talk about how they feel about it, but also talk about where they want their organization to be in terms of standing up for that. And if you look at the number of organizations that wanted to, not in a branding way, but align themselves with the cause for Black Lives Matter in this example, but there are many others. And actually that's something that will get lost in all of this. We're not going to have a meeting to discuss, so how do you feel about the outcome of the US election as an organization? It's just not going to happen, but they would be the conversations we would have today. We would be in the office, and that would be all that we talked about. And so I think I think it's absolutely crucial that we provide an organization with the vehicle, the venue, the space in which to process those non-work related conversations, but are important for the individual to feel connected. When we talked before, I don't think I'd really made that connection, Julian. So I think that's a really important part of what you have to offer. The bit that I guess would come back to on a broad level, and speaking to how you would take me through as an organization, is how do you bloody measure this stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is it. I mean, I had from my experience, I was looking at how many people were logging in every week. So if I went from 80 one week to 1 the next week, I'd know that something was going slightly awry. But I kept sort of a consistent listenership. And then it certainly grew when we started talking about the issues that we needed. I think the way that you measure this stuff is through sort of repeatedly asking people how they're feeling. And it reminds me of a film, actually, a Brad Pitt film, Ad Astra. I don't know if you have seen it. It's a sci-fi film. It's mainly for geeks. But he's an astronaut, and what he does consistently through this film is that he has to do a psychological evaluation to prove that he's fit to fly and to go out into space and to face the pressure that he may experience. And I think people probably need to do that more regularly with themselves, because what we've lost is that self-regulating company that we have around us. And I believe a lot of people are struggling with things that they maybe aren't quite as aware of, and they're not sure why they're struggling, but they feel, a bit off. And so I think the company needs to find ways of asking people how they feel. Now, there's a company I've found that does it brilliantly, and they're called the Happiness Index.
Right.
And I've found them, and they run. I think they do it for free for 6 months now during COVID. Companies can go to them, and they will send out a regular survey to your employees, and they will feed back to you. It's one question. It's like, how happy do you feel today? Score out of 1 to 10. And then there's a box for verbatims. And so what companies will get is the feedback of the verbatims and an overall score, and starting to track something over time. And measurement is massive, because, you say that this, I think you're absolutely right in what you say about leaders seeing this as an initial hump to get over, because that's what we were faced with, and that and they've done a brilliant job. If you think about what we've achieved in terms of digital working, we've travelled 10 years in 3 months potentially. But now I think we have to settle in for a slightly longer distance race, if that's not a bad analogy. And I think leaders need to really examine the leadership styles that they have and how the business functions, because parts of it, I sense that people won't be able to cope if they're having to be outside of their comfort zone for too long, and people's performance will dip, and people's morale will dip, and the next pandemic will be burnout. And so things like taking care of yourself, making self-moderating, but also giving the right forums for people to voice their concerns, and also to have the sort of quantitative measurement of it as well, I think is really crucial.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it reminds me, there's Laura and the guys at Shine Offline who've been on this show. I think they do something similar to their happiness index. I mean, they before the pandemic, their sort of whole thing was around getting the right balance from a technology perspective and all that. But I think going forward, and I was telling you before we went on air, we did have a sort of a horrific nightmare very early on with Richard Tyler talking about the concept of corporate compassion, which actually was genuine and sincere when we started talking about it, and then we had just these horrible ideas of the kind of compliance training that, how corporately compassionate have you been today? How dare you ask me that? Exactly. More than, but exactly. What would you know? But the challenge, and Jazz is on the chat, one of our regular viewers is talking about this sort of, there is, part of the challenge is if you start to struggle with the way of working and the way you are often on your own in this, and Jazz is self-employed, as am I, and so that's one thing. But if you're part of a broader organization, being connected to them and being able to find that kind of engagement, I think, is crucial. And I think the hallmarks of the organizations that will do well out of this are the ones that are listening, and the ones that really genuinely understand this and do it. And look, I'm lucky enough to be working with a number of them. I see some, if you take my friends in the hospitality industry, for example, who are going through, possibly one of the worst experiences of all of the sectors.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are others that are maybe worse,
Yeah.
but these are guys that pretty having it pretty tough. But it is the people that really matter, and not just because it's hospitality, but that's how you run a business, on the people. And you can see the leadership really, rising up to the challenge and investing in the right way, whilst some really difficult, decisions and challenges in the environment are going on around them. But
Yeah,
from a leadership
absolutely.
perspective, I think it's being open-minded enough to really see that. And I think, it's this. We've talked a lot on this show over the last 6 months about this transition from management to leadership. And I think for me, a leader is someone increasingly who is acutely aware and in tune with the human side of what's happening to the organization, and is doing, taking active steps to do it. And I think,
Yeah.
again, this is where I think what you're doing is so interesting. What I
Well, I
want to
think
do.
it's helping.
Oh, go on.
Sorry, I think it's helping for some. Sorry for cutting you off, but
No.
this is the problem of digital communication, right? I mean, this is
Put
it.
your bloody hand up when you want to do. Just put your hand up.
Case in point. Come on, where's your corporate compassion? I think there are significant groups of people that are finding this harder than others. So I think younger employees are finding it much tougher than because the social side of work is a bigger thing for them, and also they haven't got the work experience in some cases to understand what's expected always of them in the role, and they're looking for opportunities to grow. And your sort of middle-aged employees are finding it much easier because they know the expectation of them, and they know how they can manage it. And yes, they might be managing a family as well, but I think the point you make about facing something on your own, that is such a hard place to be. I've certainly felt like that in my time over my life, and the if, for example, you had that issue where you had a lot of younger employees and then some more middle-aged employees, why not buddy them up for a time so that they can learn from each other, and just have general catch-ups. It's those sorts of initiatives that you might find you can launch better through audio, and that you can get that doing. You have a daily, maybe you have a walk every week where you chat to your buddy.
Yeah, I think the point in it, and Jazz is making the comment about corporate compassion being a tick box, and that was kind of the joke when we sort of came up with it. It was a great idea, but it would turn into a tick box. But it's a bit why I think what you're doing is so right, but it's also so right for you, because it has to be authentic, doesn't it? If you're going to do this properly as a leader, you have to be bought into it, because if you are ticking a box, then people will see through that. And I think there's a huge part of what you're doing, which is the authenticity of the journey that you've been on, but also I think it's a bit of you as an individual. You're in tune with that sort of that social side and making that happen. What I wanted to do briefly, I wanted just to flick to your website, which is lovely, by the way. And yeah, look at that. It's fantastic. Because when I sort of looked at it, what jumped out at me, I was like, collectivity, what's that? He's having a laugh. He's made that up.
Yeah.
He comes from the ad industry. He's just picked that word up, added a few extra vowels, consonants, and he's away. And then I looked it up and I thought, oh, bloody hell, no, it is a word. Talk to me a bit about collectivity. Why? What is that?
Well, what is that? So collectivity is the sense of being in a collective. And to cut a long story short, that is what I think people are missing. But they don't know what it's called. And yes, I come from the advertising and marketing industry, and yes, we are guilty of coining phrases and using what we might call interesting words. But it is a real word, and I think it's also something that is kind of new, because the focus on it now, it's something new that a company, that an HR team, a people team, leaders will need to pay some attention. Because we're not all together in an office, and some companies weren't already, but an awful lot of them are. We are all missing that kind of dipstick temperature check, or how busy is the office feeling today? What is the vibe that we're getting out of the office? What's the buzz? What's the, dare I say it, hum that's coming from the office? And collectivity, I think, is just that spirit of being together. An office is not an organisation chart. It is a complex network that are all intertwined. There are people in the office that like the same music as you. There are people in the office that share the same taste in food or in movies, or you just have a shared passion around your work, and you've always enjoy working together and get the best out of each other when you do that. All of these chance interventions, all of these chats, all of these small interactions that maybe would have just punctuated your day, I would class those as the collectivity. And also, when a company does come together, let's say there's a town hall, the collectivity of an office is not the time when you're all together, although it feels sometimes very powerful to be with all the team. It's also about that chat you have when you get back to your desk to go, so I heard X, Y, and Z. Did you hear that? No. Well, no, it's funny. I didn't pick up on that. I was more interested in da 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 da. And so I think these are the things all missing. It's not all about, let's all sit and chat about folk music. It is because that's what we love. It is about just sharing the things that we all need to have a view on and want to have a view on. And it's also about companies doing activity, and I would propose you do it via audio to prompt some of those discussions. It can lead to other discussions and take on a life of its own.
Is it? I mean, you talk about audio there, and I get that. And could I do this? Really simply, could I just set up an online forum? Inside the firewall, obviously, like a Slack workspace or a Yammer or Teams, whatever. Could is that a start? Is that a place to start with this?
You could do. I think I ran the radio show from Microsoft Teams, and it served us pretty well. I was able to broadcast in it. I was able to dazzle people with my amazing light shows. This is only just part of my vast arsenal of stuff. There's enough of that. But what you get with that is, you get that there's no shortage now of platforms that will give you video if you want it, but it's broadcast over video. We're not trying to. I think we've all tried to have a meeting over video, and it's stilted, right? It's hard. But I think if you've got something that you've pulled together and you've prepared for someone, and in that sense, it's a bit of a performance. People will listen to it and they can react to it via the comments, and then that can help you to go, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's a really good point. And yes, this is these kinds of things, these sorts of events are you are wasting your tools if you only broadly never listen to what comes back. And I think I'm a big fan of audio. I always have been, ever since I've been a kid. And I think the power of audio is such that it stimulates a different part of the brain. I'm talking to you now, but we are in a call and response, send and receive game. If I was listening, I would be imagining where we might be. I might be imagining what we look like, and and my brain would be constructing these sorts of things. So it's an altogether more creative exercise. I think also audio is so transporting. It can take you to places within seconds, and your brain can put you there, and that then stimulates you. I think also it's passive, and there's a real benefit to it being passive because you can do something else while you are listening to something. So you can let things sift. You can multitask. You can go for a walk, which we all need to do when the sun is shining these days to get out of the house and listen to something else. You can be sat watching the world go by, but equally you could be doing the chores. You could be putting the washing on, cleaning the kitchen. Whatever you need, but you're still tuning in to something and thinking about something. So I think it's. I would hope that getting companies in touch with the whole gambit of their communications options will give them those options to communicate in the right way at the right time with the right groups of people. So I don't need to go out and buy something brand new. Let's work with what you've got. Um, and it's more about harnessing the power of your people and putting that people as a speaker back up against your business, I think.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I love that concept of basically a speaker in the business, but also I think you nailed it for me with the whole concept of being passive, because that was always the problem with the sort of the virtual forums is, the only people who tend to turn up there are people who just feel they've got to say something, and quite often they're the last bloody people you want
Yeah.
to hear from. Or maybe that's just the people I work with, who knows? So look, what I want to do is conscious of time. What we always tend to do at the end of these conversations is it's the classic sort of interview technique. I'm a business leader. I'm sort of interested in what's the one thing I need to do if I'm thinking about how do I increase the collectivity and engagement of
Yeah.
our people. What's the one thing I need to do first?
Well, the one thing you need to do is to understand what you need your working people to achieve, and to um, what's the word? And to sort of realise the situation that they're in. So just really get that sense of empathy because it's about maybe casting aside some of the more thrusting and go-getting leadership qualities, which are powerful but maybe need to be dialed down just a touch. Let's just make sure everybody's okay and can come with us. Um, I think the the power that you can harness with engaged people, there's all sorts of research out there that says happy people, great work, and we're experiencing something that we've never been through before. So it is time to look again at some of the tools and the tools that you use and the levers that you pull, and bring in a more humane sort of set of activities that people will respond to. I think that never has a duty of care meant more than it does now, and it's a real thing. And everybody has to take responsibility for their own mental health, but businesses also need to move with the times and to help people as much as they can, because they will be the ones that will fit. The world is changing, and the measure of success is going to be how well we adapt to those changes and keep progressing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely bang on, and I feel quite strongly about what you said in terms of the duty of care. Yes, of course, it's our own responsibility as individuals, but I think part of the working arrangement, the contract of work, is also about ensuring that we're doing right by our people. So I think that's a fantastic place for us to leave it. Julian, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have
Thank
you
you
on.
so much.
And just for clarity, the website where we can find all about this?
www.humnotdrum.com.
Wonderful. All right, that's great. Thanks, Julian.
Thanks, Dave.
So that was a great conversation. Absolutely brilliant. I do encourage you to go and check that out and have that conversation. Think about, what are you going to do as an organization to fill in those gaps, to connect those lost social spaces. That's it for this week. It's been a great conversation. We are, I think, going back into the world of higher education next week. We're going to have a really, really good conversation about some interesting work that's being done about the long-term future for further education. So I hope you can join us for that. Hope you've enjoyed this today. As always, if you've enjoyed it, let us know. If you haven't enjoyed it, still let us know, because we'd always like to be a bit better. Subscribe if you can. Hope everything's good with you. Good luck with lockdown. We're going to be here for you as far as I'm aware, and as much as we can be every single week. So we'd love to have you, as always, for part of that conversation. Take care of each other. Look after yourself. Stay safe, and we will see you soon. Thanks, guys.
There are 1,000 stories in the Envisioners' future. This is just one of them.